Should we respect the nobility of Confederate soldiers in the American Civil War, as well as their loyalty to their cause? The short answer is no. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I want to talk about a bit of a strange and particularly interesting short story and author that I stumbled across today. Today's short story is all about the end of the American Civil War. I am referring to The Burial or The Battle of the Guns. I've heard it expressed two different ways, by Thomas Nelson Page, which was written in 1894. For those who don't know, Thomas Nelson Page was an American lawyer, politician, and writer. They served as the ambassador to Italy during the Woodrow Wilson administration, which is pretty interesting. And they also did a bunch of lawyering. In addition to that, they wrote a number of short stories as well as a book or two that primarily focused on historical revisionism of the American Civil War. Basically, they spread the idea of the lost cause of the Confederacy, that the idea that the Civil War wasn't actually fought over slavery, but was fought over the South trying to preserve their heritage, their noble agrarian lifestyle. They wanted to fight for the heroic effort of states' rights, and that any effort to say it was about slavery just diminishes or reduces the factors of the American Civil War just to one cause. And historians largely argue that that's not true. They say it is precisely due to slavery. The South wanted states' rights. Well, what rights did they want? They wanted the rights to own slaves. That's the main cause of the American Civil War. One side wanted to abolish slavery, and the other side wanted to preserve it. There were other factors at play, but that was the main cause. And a lot of people have criticized Thomas Page for spreading that idea and noting that it is harmful. And indeed, I believe it is harmful. And you might be wondering, Mr. Nothing, why are you talking about this author if you don't like them? And I think it's important to talk about this revisionism when it comes up, not only of the American Civil War, but of other points in history as well. Because there is a set in true history to the United States, to the world at large. And if you try to sort of revise or even lie about it, that needs to be talked about. That we can't just let these lies simply pass and have people accept them without really thinking about them. So today I guess I'm just sort of criticizing this dude's writing, but I'm also highlighting it. Let's have a discussion about this. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So without further ado, let's talk about The Burial of the Guns. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Burial of the Guns focuses on an old colonel leading a military unit that he's been given control of. At the beginning of the story, we see that Robert E. Lee has surrendered at the end of the American Civil War, but various of these military units are still fighting because they haven't received the news yet, including an old colonel who is working with a ragtag group of Confederate soldiers to prevent further Virginia invasions in case the Union tries to attack again, because the Union has made pretty far incursions into the South, and the old colonel is trying to prevent that. The old colonel has been fighting since the war began. They didn't have to sign up, but they chose to. And what's interesting is that they were against secession in the first place, but they decided to sign up with Virginia and ally with the governor of Virginia, who seceded, even though that's an act of traitor. That's being a traitor right there. So the old colonel has been fighting. A lot of soldiers have been lost. A lot of guns have been lost, but people are still sort of going through. Like, people are still sticking through and trying their best to help the South sort of stay on their toes here. And at this current moment in time, they're currently in a battle with Union forces to prevent that further invasion into Virginia. It's a small force. There's a daily battle, and then they go back and sort of retreat for a little bit. They're just about to sort of continue fighting when they get news of the surrender. The colonel and the men are taken aback. They have a loyalty to the Confederacy, to General Lee, but it seems that the war is over now. And so the colonel announces his plans to send the men home. They have fulfilled their duty to the South, and he hopes that their children will take up like the heritage of defending the South in the future. They do the ration out the remaining food, and they throw the weapons, the guns in the lake. And they choose to remember the dead at this point, all of the people who were lost, who were injured, all the guns that were lost in the process. It's a very noble and very heartwarming moment if you view it from afar without thinking too deeply about it. And as the story comes to a close, the unit leaves, and the colonel has done his job, so everything is done for now. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about and a lot to criticize in this story. One of the main themes that Page is working with here is that of duty. Each soldier feels a duty to the overall cause. They feel a duty to General Lee. They see him as a heroic figure defending the South against the federal forces, and the soldiers feel compelled to give their lives and give as much as they can in order to preserve the South in some way, because the South in their eyes is not merely fighting over slavery. They're fighting for the plantation lifestyle. They're fighting for the heritage of the South, the agrarian economy versus the urban sort of lifestyle of the North. So duty is very important to these people, including the colonel, who has a chance to sort of ally with the North at the beginning of the war, but they see the Confederacy as a cause worth fighting for. They joined the government of Virginia even though they were against secession. So in effort, they sully their own name by making themselves to be traitors, to sort of deny what their actual duty is and to support this bad cause. If you look at it from the outside, like they're choosing to fight for slavery, even if they don't acknowledge that they're fighting for slavery, like that's what they're fighting for. It doesn't matter if you pretend that you're fighting for a noble goal. If the end output is continued slavery, like you're fighting for continued slavery. It is black and white. There is no shades of gray in this story, like people would have you believe. In the colonel's eyes, this is all worth fighting for. They endure hardship because of their belief. They endure like all of these conditions because they believe in the cause. It is their duty. It is something that is right in their eyes. And when the time comes to surrender, at first they don't believe it, the colonel especially. But they realize they have no other choice but to accept that what's come about, this surrender. Despite that, though, it still affirms their duty. It still leads them to support their cause in some way. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. "Men," he said, and his voice changed at the word and sounded like a father's or a brother's. "My men, I cannot let you go so. We were neighbors when the war began, many of us, and some not here tonight. We have been more since then, comrades, brothers in arms. We have all stood for one thing, for Virginia and the South. We have all done our duty, tried to do our duty. We have fought a good fight, and now it seems to be over. And we have been overwhelmed by numbers, not whipped, and we are going home." And that's an interesting quote because it gets at that sort of duty, to understanding that they fulfilled it. They did not quit. They did not allow themselves to get defeated. They continued until they were no longer able to do so because of the conditions of others. And what happens is that, now they have to go home. They did that, and so it's over. There's no more fighting to be done. And on the surface, it really seems like a noble sort of desire on the part of the soldiers, on the part of the colonel, to continue fighting for such a worthy cause. But I would argue that it is superficially noble, in that on the outside it seems like they're fighting for a just cause. As I said in the intro, there's the lost cause of the Confederacy, that they were fighting for states' rights and their agrarian lifestyle and their plantation tradition. But as historians have correctly pointed out, they were actually just fighting for slavery. They wanted to preserve the right to own another human being simply because of the color of their skin. And I would argue that that's not noble at all. Even if these men, which is often the case, they were probably poor men who did not have plantations, although the colonel did, even though they themselves did not own slaves, they were still fighting to preserve slavery at the end of the day. I don't care if they knew that or they didn't know that. That's what they were fighting for, and that means that what they're fighting for is not noble. Another thing that Page is talking about here is that of brotherhood. Page does a good job of showing brotherhood amongst soldiers, willing to fight for one another, willing to help each other stand up in times of dire straits, and remembering those that have been lost. There is reverence for the colonel, for General Lee, for the leaders of the military, because they are guiding you, hopefully, in the right direction. So brotherhood kind of extends to all aspects of the military, and you would hope that the colonel and the general would see the men in the same way, which, as we see in the story, is probably the case. And again, it's important not to forget the dead, which they don't do in this story, because they make sure to write down some notes on who specifically died, and who is going to be remembered, and other good things like that. Just trying to keep those people alive, that they didn't fight for nothing, that they gave their lives for some purpose, and they're going to be remembered for that purpose. So it's a very tender moment before departure. These men are your brothers, and you might not see them again because of it being it being the American Civil War. So even though you're departing, you're still remembering what these people meant to you and how they helped defend your livelihood, your lives, and maybe saved your skin a few times. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Burial of the Guns by Thomas Page. An interesting short story, but not for the reasons that you might think. I ultimately did not like this. I don't think you should really seek it out. It's not worth your time. It's overlong, and it also sort of celebrates a bad moment in history, but it supports the wrong moment, and it does so in an effort to revise history in a very negative way, rather than simply facing the truth that the South owned slaves and they were fighting to keep owning those slaves. It pretends that the South was actually fighting for a noble cause. An effort. It's once again denying the ugly truths about racism in America. And if we never fully address these ugly truths, our country is never going to heal. Never going to get over that slump of the racist history and our racist present and our probably racist future. We need to address these things rather than pretend they did not exist, which is what Thomas Page is doing here, and that makes him a bad writer, and it makes him a bad person too, I would say. He probably understood that. He was a lawyer. He was an ambassador as well. He was probably one of those, social climbers that you see in this day and age, and he was doing it in an effort to sort of maybe piggyback on something that was already developing there. But the unfortunate consequences of doing this kind of things are things like the development of the KKK, the establishment of movies like Birth of a Nation, and the continued ignorance of racial issues in America that we see today. So Thomas Paige is clearly, a problematic writer here, and I don't recommend that you really read this. But I'll still put a link to it in the description just so you can find it if you want to. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this, as I've mentioned before. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author and hate on him like I'm doing here. And also this story if they don't know about it. But I'm hopefully no one just reads this story for fun. Without further ado, I hope you have the best of luck in your weird and hopefully not revisionist travels. Farewell.